Metropolitan Symphony Hall falls into stunned silence as real estate billionaire Vincent Crane stands before 2,000 attendees, tears streaming down his face as he publicly apologizes for the mockery that nearly destroyed an extraordinary musical gift. Crane's confident arrogance crumbles as he watches 17-year-old Zara Bennett command the stage with a classical guitar performance that has left the assembled elite breathless. The same girl he dismissed 48 hours earlier as another street kid pretending to have talent she could never possess. "Ladies and gentlemen," Crane announces, his voice breaking with emotion throughout the packed concert hall, "2 days ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I encountered Miss Zara Bennett performing on Broadway Street, and I told her that real musical talent requires proper training, resources, and background, things I assumed she could never have." His eyes lock onto Zara, who stands holding her battered guitar with quiet dignity. "I told witnesses that street musicians are just noise pollution, and that people from her circumstances don't create real art." The gathered crowd watches in recognition. The billionaire who 48 hours ago had dismissed her as worthless now faces the young woman whose performance has exposed his prejudice. And his entire perspective on talent, worth, and humanity has been forever transformed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 48 hours earlier, 17-year-old Zara Bennett had been preparing for her daily street performance on Broadway Street corner when she received news about a prestigious music competition that would require the most important audition of her self-taught musical journey. Zara had spent the past 6 years teaching herself classical guitar through library books, online tutorials, and countless hours of practice on an instrument her grandmother had purchased from a pawn shop for $35 on her 10th birthday. Her musical education had been built on determination rather than privilege. Her extraordinary talent developed through relentless dedication while helping her mother Grace work multiple jobs to support their family in Riverside neighborhood. The Metropolitan Youth Music Competition represented an opportunity that seemed impossibly distant for a girl whose family struggled to afford rent, much less private music lessons or conservatory training that other competitors would certainly possess. But Mama Rose Bennett, Zara's grandmother, who had recognized her granddaughter's gift during childhood, had encouraged her to pursue musical dreams despite economic limitations. "Talent don't need money to exist, baby. God gives gifts to everyone, not just rich folks." Zara's street performances served dual purposes, practicing her craft while earning modest income that helped her mother pay bills and support her 10-year-old brother Isaiah, whose medical expenses from childhood asthma strained their already limited resources. Her corner near the Metropolitan Arts District had become her stage, her classroom, and her testing ground, where she refined technique while sharing music with passers-by who occasionally dropped coins into her open guitar case. Vincent Crane had built his real estate empire through aggressive development that transformed urban neighborhoods into luxury properties, his $20 billion fortune making him one of the nation's most influential businessmen and philanthropists. At 54, Crane's success had been built on ruthless business acumen and unwavering belief that achievement required proper background, elite education, and social connections that separated serious professionals from common workers. His philanthropic work focused on prestigious cultural institutions and elite educational programs that served already privileged populations. His giving philosophy emphasizing excellence through exclusivity rather than accessibility Crane's perspective on art and talent reflected his elitist worldview. Genuine ability required proper training at recognized institutions, and street performers represented amateur pretenders rather than serious artists deserving professional recognition. His daughter Emily Crane, 18, had been privately challenging her father's prejudices about social class and opportunity, her privileged education having paradoxically opened her eyes to systemic inequality. Dad, talent exists everywhere, not just among people who can afford conservatory training. But Crane had dismissed her perspectives as youthful idealism that would fade with maturity and business experience. Emily, the world rewards those who invest in proper development. Street entertainment isn't the same as professional artistry. The Metropolitan Arts District, where Crane's company was developing luxury condominiums, had become contested territory between preservation advocates who valued community culture and developers who envisioned upscale transformation. Street vendors like Hassan Ali, who had operated his corner stand for 20 years, faced displacement as rising property values and new regulations threatened small businesses and community gathering spaces. Zara's daily performances had become symbolic of community resistance to cultural erasure, her music representing artistic expression that didn't require wealth or institutional approval to create beauty and meaning. What neither Zara nor Crane could have anticipated was how their encounter would transform from routine street mockery into catalytic moment that would challenge everything Crane believed about talent, worth, and human potential. The music competition announcement had given Zara hope for recognition beyond street corners, but entering required registration fees and professional recording equipment that remained impossibly beyond her family's financial reach. Grace Bennett worked 3 jobs: morning cleaning shift at office buildings, afternoon retail position, and evening restaurant service, her relentless labor barely covering basic expenses while leaving little time for family connection. As Zara prepared for another day of street performance, while dreaming about competition opportunities that seemed designed for privileged students rather than self-taught musicians from struggling families, she understood that talent alone might never be enough. The guitarist who had spent 6 years perfecting her craft through determination and sacrifice was about to encounter the billionaire whose mockery would paradoxically create the opportunity that changed both their lives forever. Zara Bennett positioned herself at her usual Broadway street corner at 2:30 p.m., her battered classical guitar carefully tuned despite worn strings that she replaced only when absolutely necessary due to cost constraints. The afternoon sunlight highlighted the instrument's scratches and faded finish, visible testament to years of dedicated practice and countless street performances that had refined her extraordinary but unrecognized talent. She began with Bach's Prelude in C major, her fingers moving across the fretboard with precision that belied her lack of formal training, the complex classical piece executed with technical mastery that passers-by rarely appreciated or understood. Vincent Crane exited his corporate offices 3 blocks away, his afternoon schedule including property inspection tours of Broadway Street development sites where his company was planning luxury residential towers. His assistant, Amanda Foster, accompanied him with tablets displaying architectural renderings and financial projections. Their conversation focused on profit margins and market positioning rather than existing community culture or displacement concerns. Crane's approach to the corner where Zara performed was accompanied by business partner Robert Chen, whose enthusiasm for the development project matched Crane's vision for upscale transformation. This district has tremendous potential once we clear out the street vendors and amateur performers. The characterization of community members as obstacles to be cleared rather than residents, to be considered reflected exactly the perspective that Zara's presence would challenge. Zara transitioned into a more complex piece, her own arrangement of Vivaldi's Four Seasons, adapted for solo classical guitar, the ambitious composition demonstrating both technical skill and creative interpretation that professional musicians would recognize as exceptional. Crane paused near Zara's performance space, his attention drawn not by appreciation, but by annoyance at what he perceived as noise pollution interfering with business discussions. "This is exactly what we're trying to eliminate from this district." His dismissive tone carried clearly to Zara, whose concentration wavered as she recognized contempt rather than indifference in his voice. "Street musicians who think they're performing art when they're just creating noise," Crane continued, his volume suggesting he either didn't care if Zara heard or actively wanted her to understand his contempt. Zara completed her piece before responding with quiet dignity. "Sir, I'm playing Vivaldi arranged for classical guitar. It's a complex piece that requires years of study and practice." Her polite correction should have prompted reconsideration, or at minimum respectful acknowledgement, but Crane's response revealed deep-seated prejudice. "Young lady, real musicians train at conservatories and perform in concert halls. Street corners are for amateurs pretending to have talent they could never actually possess." The assertion that her performance location determined her ability rather than her actual skill demonstrated exactly the elitism that limited opportunity for talented youth from disadvantaged backgrounds. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. College student Tyler Morrison, observing nearby, recognized obvious prejudice. "Excuse me, sir, but this young woman is playing extremely difficult classical music with impressive technical skill. Her performance quality has nothing to do with her location." Crane's response to witness intervention revealed defensive arrogance. "Young man, I've donated millions to proper musical institutions and attended countless professional performances. I know the difference between real talent and street entertainment, his equation of wealth and institutional access with artistic authority while dismissing actual demonstrated skill confirms systematic bias about class and opportunity." Street vendor Hassan Ali. Attempted community support. "Mr. Crane, Zara performs here daily and has remarkable talent. Many professional musicians have stopped to listen and praise her skill." Crane's dismissal of community testimony revealed entrenched prejudice. "Mr. Ali, people from certain backgrounds simply don't develop the same level of artistic ability as those who receive proper training and resources." The explicit assertion that poverty prevented genuine talent development, while wealth enabled it, demonstrated exactly the prejudice that Zara had faced throughout her musical journey. As Crane continued his dismissive commentary while preparing to leave, photographer James Parker captured the encounter that would soon become viral documentation of elitism and prejudice. Zara maintained her composure while internally processing the humiliation, her dignity intact despite Crane's cruelty, her talent undiminished by his inability to recognize extraordinary ability when it appeared outside expected contexts. Vincent Crane's mockery of Zara Bennett escalated beyond casual dismissal to public humiliation as additional. Bystanders gathered while his contemptuous assessment of street musicians attracted attention and documented witness testimony. This is precisely why arts funding should focus on established institutions rather than community programs, Crane announced to his business associates while gesturing dismissively toward Zara. "Real talent emerges from proper training, not street corners where anyone with a guitar pretends to be a musician." His characterization of Zara's years of dedicated practice as pretending while equating formal training with genuine ability revealed systematic prejudice about class, opportunity, and artistic worth. Emily Crane, who had been shopping nearby, arrived to witness her father's behavior with obvious embarrassment. "Dad, you're being incredibly rude to someone who's actually performing beautiful classical music. Her technical skill is impressive regardless of where she's playing." Crane's response to his daughter's challenge revealed entrenched beliefs. "Emily, you're too young to understand that artistic achievement requires resources, connections, and institutional validation. Street performers are hobbyists, not serious artists." The dismissal of demonstrated skill while prioritizing institutional credentials over actual ability showed exactly the systemic bias that prevented talented youth from disadvantaged backgrounds from receiving recognition and opportunity. Zara attempted to redirect through her music, beginning an original composition that showcased not only technical mastery, but creative artistry that any professional would recognize as exceptional talent. Tourist Patricia Young, who had attended professional classical concerts internationally, recognized extraordinary ability. "Excuse me, I'm a classical music enthusiast, and this young woman's playing is absolutely professional quality. Her technique and musicality are remarkable." Crane's response to expert witness testimony revealed defensive arrogance. "Ma'am, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but there's a difference between adequate street performance and genuine concert-level artistry that requires years of conservatory training." His continued dismissal despite multiple witnesses confirming Zara's skill demonstrated willful blindness, driven by prejudice rather than honest assessment of demonstrated ability. Cafe owner Maria Rodriguez approached with professional support. "Mr. Crane, Zara performs outside my cafe regularly, and I've had professional musicians tell me she has extraordinary talent. Several have offered to help her pursue formal training." Crane's dismissal of business owner testimony revealed systematic disrespect. "Ms. Rodriguez, business owners naturally support street performers who attract customers. But that doesn't mean they possess professional-level ability." The characterization of community support as self-interest rather than genuine recognition of talent confirmed Crane's predetermined conclusions based on class prejudice rather than evidence. Music journalist Lisa Anderson, researching a story about street musicians, began interviewing witnesses while documenting Crane's behavior. This interaction perfectly illustrates how elitism prevents talented artists from disadvantaged backgrounds from receiving recognition and opportunity they deserve. Her professional journalism perspective provided media documentation that would ensure Crane's prejudice faced public accountability. Beyond immediate witness testimony, Pastor Samuel Wright, Zara's community leader, attempted moral intervention. "Mr. Crane, this young woman has extraordinary God-given talent that she's developed through remarkable dedication despite economic challenges. Your dismissal of her ability is both inaccurate and cruel." Crane's response to religious community leadership revealed comprehensive disrespect. "Reverend, religious communities understandably support their members, but that doesn't change the reality that professional artistry requires resources and training that street performers lack." His continued mockery despite community, professional and religious testimony confirmed systematic prejudice that no amount of evidence would immediately overcome, as Crane prepared to leave while making final dismissive comments about amateur street entertainment. His daughter Emily made a decision that would transform the situation from temporary humiliation to catalytic opportunity. "Dad, I'm going to record Zara's performance and share it with Professor Carter at Metropolitan Conservatory," Emily announced. "Let's see what actual professional music educators say about her talent." Her challenge, using institutional authority that her father claimed to respect, created accountability that Crane couldn't easily dismiss through class prejudice. Crane's reaction revealed awareness that professional institutional validation might undermine his dismissive assessment, but his pride prevented immediate reconsideration of the mockery that multiple witnesses had now documented. While Vincent Crane continued his dismissive mockery of Zara Bennett at Broadway Street Corner, multiple parallel developments were occurring that would transform a moment of personal humiliation into comprehensive challenge of systemic prejudice about talent, class, and opportunity. Emily Crane immediately uploaded video of Zara's performance to social media platforms with commentary challenging her father's elitism. "My father just mocked this incredibly talented street musician, claiming real artists only come from conservatories. Let's let her music speak for itself." The post began circulating rapidly among music students, professional musicians, and social justice advocates who recognized both extraordinary talent and obvious class prejudice, requiring public accountability. Famous guitarist Carlos Mendoza, whose legendary status made him authority that even Crane would respect, saw Emily's post during afternoon break from recording sessions. "This young woman has absolutely exceptional classical guitar technique. Someone please connect me with her immediately." His professional validation from internationally recognized artist provided exactly the institutional credibility that Crane claimed Zara lacked. Music producer Jennifer Cole, who specialized in discovering and developing emerging artists, contacted Emily within 30 minutes. "I want to meet this guitarist and discuss recording opportunities. Her technical skill and musicality are absolutely professional quality." The industry interest demonstrated that Zara's talent was receiving recognition from professionals whose expertise exceeded Crane's wealthy patron perspective. Meanwhile, Professor Helen Carter at Metropolitan Conservatory received Emily's video through faculty networks and recognized extraordinary ability. This student demonstrates technique and musicality that many of our enrolled students haven't achieved. Who is she, and why isn't she studying here? Her academic professional assessment provided institutional validation that directly contradicted Crane's assumption that conservatory training preceded rather than followed. Demonstrated exceptional talent. Social media activist Nicole Brooks amplified Emily's post with commentary about systemic inequality. Billionaire mocks poor black girl's street performance, while his daughter records evidence of his prejudice and her extraordinary talent. This is why wealth doesn't equal wisdom. The viral spread ensured that Crane's mockery would face comprehensive public accountability, while Zara's talent would receive attention that street performance alone could never provide. Documentary filmmaker Tony Kim contacted Emily about featuring Zara's story in his project examining how economic inequality prevents talented youth from pursuing artistic careers. This situation perfectly illustrates systematic barriers that talent alone cannot overcome. Classical music critic Dr. Eugene Davis, whose reviews influenced professional music world, analyzed Zara's performance with expert assessment. This guitarist demonstrates conservatory-level technique achieved through what appears to be entirely self-directed study. Her ability is absolutely remarkable and deserves professional recognition. His authoritative professional validation provided exactly the institutional credibility that Crane claimed only formal training could produce. Radio host Karen Wilson dedicated her evening music program to discussing Zara's story, while playing the video that was rapidly accumulating millions of views. This young woman's talent challenges everything we assume about how artistic ability develops and who deserves recognition. The media attention was transforming Zara's street corner performance into national conversation about class, opportunity, and systemic prejudice in arts education and professional recognition. Metropolitan Conservatory Dean William Foster called emergency faculty meeting to discuss scholarship opportunities. If this student's talent is as exceptional as Professor Carter indicates, we should be pursuing her rather than waiting for her to somehow access application processes designed for privileged students. The institutional response demonstrated that Zara's ability was creating exactly the opportunities that her economic circumstances had previously prevented. Philanthropic director Angela Martinez, who managed arts education funding, contacted community organizations. We need to identify and support talented youth like Zara Bennett, who face systematic barriers despite extraordinary ability. Community leader Reverend Wright coordinated local support while ensuring Zara's family received assistance navigating suddenly overwhelming attention and opportunities. God's been preparing Zara for this moment, but she needs community support to handle what's coming. As viral attention accumulated and professional validation multiplied, Crane remained unaware that his mockery had triggered exactly the comprehensive public accountability that would force confrontation with his prejudices. The billionaire who had dismissed Zara as amateur street entertainment was about to discover that his wealth and philanthropy didn't grant him authority over artistic ability or exemption from consequences when public documentation exposed systematic prejudice and cruel elitism. Within 12 hours of Vincent Crane's public mockery, comprehensive social media documentation and professional music world response had transformed Zara Bennett's street corner humiliation into viral phenomenon that would force direct confrontation with systematic prejudice about talent and opportunity. Emily Crane's video had accumulated 7 million views, while generating thousands of comments from professional musicians, music educators, and social justice advocates who recognize both extraordinary talent and obvious class bias requiring accountability. Carlos Mendoza posted direct response that challenged Vincent Crane's authority. I've performed with the world's greatest classical guitarists, and this young woman's technique is absolutely professional quality. Mr. Crane, your wealth doesn't qualify you to judge musical ability you obviously cannot recognize. The public challenge from internationally respected artist provided validation that Crane's institutional philanthropy couldn't dismiss or override through financial influence. Music producer Cole announced immediate interest. I'm offering Zara Bennett professional recording session and artist development contract. Her talent deserves industry support that economic circumstances have prevented. The concrete professional opportunity demonstrated that Zara's ability was generating exactly the recognition and resources that street performance alone could never provide. Professor Carter contacted Zara's family directly with scholarship offer. Metropolitan Conservatory wants to offer Zara full scholarship, including instrument, private lessons, and performance opportunities. Her talent is absolutely exceptional. The institutional validation from prestigious music school provided exactly the formal recognition that Crane had claimed only existing students could possess. Vincent Crane became aware of the viral phenomenon when his PR director, Jennifer Sullivan, presented emergency briefing. Sir, your daughter's video showing you mocking a talented street musician has generated severe negative publicity. Social media is calling you elitist, prejudiced, and cruel. Crane's initial response revealed defensive denial. I simply stated facts about professional music requiring proper training. People are overreacting to honest assessment of street performance quality. His inability to recognize demonstrated prejudice despite overwhelming professional contradiction showed exactly the entrenched bias that public accountability was designed to challenge. Business partner Chen warned about financial implications. Vincent, major clients are questioning our company's values. Your public mockery of a talented black teenager is creating serious reputation damage that could affect business relationships. The corporate consequences demonstrated that Crane's prejudice carried professional costs beyond personal embarrassment or social media criticism. Daughter Emily escalated family confrontation with direct challenge. Dad, Every professional musician who's seen that video says Zara has extraordinary talent. Your mockery wasn't honest assessment. It was prejudice based on her race and economic status. Her explicit naming of racial and class bias forced Crane to confront motivations he had disguised as objective artistic evaluation. Catherine Crane, Vincent's wife, whose philanthropic work emphasized education access, expressed private disappointment. "Vincent, your behavior contradicts everything we claim to believe about merit and opportunity. You judge that girl based on appearance and location rather than actual demonstrated ability." The personal family accountability added emotional weight beyond public and professional consequences that Crane was experiencing. Meanwhile, community support for Zara intensified as local organizations coordinated assistance. Zara needs support navigating sudden opportunities while maintaining family stability and personal well-being, Reverend Wright coordinated through church networks. The community protection ensured that Zara's talent revelation wouldn't become exploitation or overwhelming pressure that damaged rather than enhanced her musical development. Media coverage expanded beyond social media to mainstream news outlets, covering the story as example of systematic inequality. Billionaire's mockery accidentally exposes talented teenager who faced barriers despite exceptional ability. The journalistic framing transformed individual incident into broader examination of how wealth and prejudice prevented recognition of talent that existed outside privileged contexts. As professional validation accumulated and public criticism intensified, Crane faced unavoidable choice: maintain defensive prejudice or confront uncomfortable truths about bias, privilege, and systematic inequality he had never previously acknowledged. His daughter's final challenge forced decision. "Dad, Zara is performing at Metropolitan Symphony Hall tomorrow night in special concert Carlos Mendoza is organizing. Every professional musician will be there. You can attend and witness what your prejudice almost destroyed. Or you can stay home and prove that your mockery was based on prejudice you refuse to acknowledge." The invitation to witness Zara's ability in formal concert setting that Crane respected would provide unavoidable confrontation with his bias and opportunity for transformation that public accountability had created. Metropolitan Symphony Hall represented the pinnacle of classical music prestige, and Zara Bennett's presence on its historic stage transformed the venue from symbol of elite exclusivity into space challenging systematic prejudice about talent, worth, and opportunity. The concert, organized by Carlos Mendoza specifically to showcase Zara's ability, had attracted 2,000 attendees, including music industry professionals, conservatory faculty, philanthropists, and community members who understood the performance's broader significance. Vincent Crane attended reluctantly under family pressure, his seat in the front row ensuring unavoidable confrontation with the talent he had dismissed based on prejudice he was only beginning to acknowledge. As Zara walked onto the stage carrying her battered pawnshop guitar that contrasted sharply with the hall's opulent surroundings, the visual symbolism was unmistakable. Extraordinary ability required no wealth or privilege to exist. She positioned herself simply, no elaborate introduction or explanation, allowing her music to speak with the authority that words could never match. Zara began with the Bach prelude she had been playing when Crane first mocked her, the same piece he had dismissed as street noise, now revealing itself as technically flawless execution of one of classical music's most challenging works. The hall's perfect acoustics showcased every nuance of her technique. Her phrasing demonstrated deep musical understanding, and her emotional interpretation revealed artistry that conservatory training often failed to develop. Crane felt his dismissive certainty crumbling as he recognized ability that exceeded many professional performances he had attended. her self-taught mastery exposing how profoundly wrong his prejudiced assessment had been. She transitioned into her original composition, the piece she had been playing when Crane's mockery escalated, now revealed as creative genius, combining classical technique with innovative harmonic progressions that demonstrated not merely technical skill, but genuine artistic vision. Professional musicians in attendance recognized immediately what Crane was discovering. This was not merely competent performance, but extraordinary talent that emerged perhaps once in a generation. Maestro Bellamy, whose conducting career spanned 5 decades, listened with visible emotion. I've rarely heard classical guitar performed at this level. Her musicality is absolutely exceptional. His professional validation confirmed what Crane could no longer deny. His mockery had been based entirely on prejudice rather than any genuine assessment of demonstrated ability. As Zara continued performing, transitioning through increasingly complex classical repertoire that showcased both technical mastery and profound musical sensitivity, Crane experienced comprehensive dismantling of assumptions he had held throughout his life. Her performance challenged everything he had believed about talent requiring privilege, ability necessitating formal training, and worth being determined by institutional validation rather than demonstrated excellence. The pawnshop guitar, in Zara's skilled hands, produced music as beautiful as any expensive instrument, proving that tools mattered far less than the artist wielding them. A metaphor for systematic inequality, Crane was finally understanding. During the final movement, Zara performed piece she had composed about dreams deferred by economic barriers, her music expressing the pain of talent dismissed and potential constrained by circumstances beyond individual control. Crane felt tears, beginning as he recognized himself in the music's narrative. He was the barrier, the dismissive authority, the systematic prejudice that prevented extraordinary ability from receiving recognition and opportunity it deserved. When Zara completed her final note, the hall erupted in standing ovation that continued for 7 minutes, the audience recognition far exceeding typical concert response, because everyone understood they were witnessing not merely performance, but transformation. Crane stood with everyone else, but unlike their celebratory applause, his tears reflected shame, recognition, and beginning of fundamental shift in understanding about privilege, prejudice, and human worth. As audience members began leaving, Crane remained seated, emotionally unable to move, while processing the magnitude of his error and cruelty. Emily approached her father with gentle confrontation. "Dad, do you understand now? Zara's talent was always this extraordinary. Your mockery wasn't honest assessment. It was prejudice that almost destroyed something beautiful." Crane nodded, silently, his usual confident articulation abandoned as he confronted uncomfortable truths about himself that could no longer be denied or rationalized. "I need to apologize," he finally stated, "not just to Zara but publicly. My mockery was based on prejudice I've held my entire life without examining. I was completely wrong." The admission represented genuine beginning of transformation that would extend far beyond individual apology to systematic change in how he understood talent, opportunity, and his responsibility to use wealth for inclusion rather than exclusion. The week following Zara Bennett's Metropolitan Symphony Hall performance triggered comprehensive transformation in Vincent Crane's life that extended far beyond personal embarrassment to fundamental restructuring of his philanthropic priorities and business practices. Crane's first action was public apology, delivered through major media outlets. "I publicly mocked Zara Bennett based on prejudiced assumptions about talent and worth. I was completely wrong, and my behavior reflected systematic bias. I'm committed to addressing in myself and the institutions I support." The apology's specificity about prejudice rather than vague misunderstanding demonstrated genuine accountability that public relations crisis management couldn't manufacture. He established the Zara Bennett Music Foundation with initial funding of $50 million dedicated to identifying and supporting talented young musicians from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. Extraordinary ability exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. This foundation will ensure talent receives support regardless of economic circumstances. The institutional response demonstrated commitment beyond individual apology to systematic change, addressing barriers his prejudice had represented. Crane redirected his philanthropic giving from exclusively elite institutions to include community arts programs, public school music education, and scholarship funds specifically supporting students who faced economic barriers. My previous giving reinforced inequality rather than addressing it. That changes now. The restructuring of charitable priorities from exclusivity to accessibility represented fundamental shift in values that Zara's talent had catalyzed. Metropolitan Conservatory received substantial funding contingent on aggressive recruitment and full scholarship support for talented students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Elite institutions must actively seek talent rather than passively waiting for applications from privileged students who alone can navigate admissions processes. The conditional funding forced institutional change rather than simply supporting existing practices that perpetuated systematic inequality. Crane personally mentored Zara through navigating sudden opportunities while protecting her from exploitation. I nearly destroyed her gift through prejudice. Now I have responsibility to help ensure opportunities enhance rather than overwhelm her talent and well-being. The personal involvement demonstrated genuine transformation rather than transactional charity that maintained emotional distance from beneficiaries. Business practices at Crane Enterprises shifted to include community impact assessments and displacement prevention measures. Development that destroys community culture and displaces residents isn't progress. It's systematic violence dressed as economic advancement. The corporate policy changes address systematic harm his business model had caused to communities like the one where he had mocked Zara. Zara's family received comprehensive support, including housing assistance, healthcare coverage, and educational funding for Isaiah. Economic security allows families to pursue dreams rather than merely survive. Support must address systematic barriers, not just individual opportunity. The holistic family support recognized that individual talent existed within family systems requiring stability for sustained development. Grace Bennett was able to reduce from 3 jobs to 1 through financial assistance and education funding that allowed her to pursue nursing degree. My previous mockery dismissed entire families' worth. Now I understand that supporting families means recognizing their dignity and potential. Professional music world embraced Zara with opportunities balanced by protective mentorship. Carlos Mendoza became artistic advisor, ensuring commercial pressures didn't compromise musical development, while producer Cole provided industry guidance protecting artistic integrity. Community celebration in Riverside neighborhood honored Zara while acknowledging systematic challenges. One girl's success doesn't eliminate barriers thousands still face. Zara's story must inspire systematic change, not just individual celebration. Documentary filmmaker Kim's project featuring Zara's story generated additional public conversation about wealth inequality and talent recognition. This story challenges assumptions about merit, opportunity, and who deserves access to resources that develop human potential. 1 year after the encounter, data showed measurable impact. Arts program funding for disadvantaged communities had increased 340% nationally. conservatory enrollment of students from low-income backgrounds had doubled, and public conversation about systematic inequality in arts education had entered mainstream discourse. Zara's talent was always extraordinary, Professor Carter reflected during anniversary symposium. What changed wasn't her ability, but systemic willingness to recognize talent that exists outside privileged contexts we've traditionally validated. Vincent Crane's transformation had extended beyond personal growth to catalyze institutional and cultural shifts that addressed systematic barriers thousands of talented young people faced. "I can't undo my mockery," Crane acknowledged during Foundation's first anniversary. "But I can ensure my remaining years serve dismantling the prejudices and barriers my privilege previously perpetuated. Zara's grace in forgiving me demands nothing less than comprehensive commitment to systematic change." Over the following 36 months, the transformation catalyzed by Zara Bennett's talent and Vincent Crane's prejudice evolved into comprehensive, systematic reform, addressing barriers that prevented talented youth from disadvantaged backgrounds from receiving recognition and support. The Zara Bennett Music Foundation expanded beyond initial $50 million to sustainable endowment of $300 million through Crane's continued contributions and additional philanthropist participation. This foundation represents permanent commitment to ensuring talent receives support, regardless of economic circumstances. Foundation Director Angela Martinez implemented innovative programs identifying talented youth through community partnerships rather than traditional audition processes that favored privileged students. We're actively seeking talent in communities that institutional systems have historically ignored or excluded. The proactive recruitment approach discovered hundreds of extraordinarily talented young musicians whose abilities had remained unrecognized due to geographic isolation, economic barriers, or racial prejudice that assumed talent existed primarily among privileged populations. Metropolitan Conservatory's transformation under Professor Carter's leadership made the institution model for inclusive excellence. 50% of students now came from backgrounds traditionally underrepresented in classical music. Full scholarships included living expenses and instrument provision, and curriculum emphasized diverse musical traditions rather than exclusively European classical canon. "Excellence and inclusion aren't competing values," Carter explained during educational conferences. "Our most talented students increasingly come from diverse backgrounds precisely because we're actively seeking talent everywhere, rather than assuming it exists only among privileged applicants." Public school music programs received unprecedented funding through coalition. Crane helped organize $2 billion annually supporting comprehensive arts education in underserved schools, instrument provision programs ensuring economic barriers didn't prevent participation, and professional musician partnerships providing mentorship and masterclasses. The systematic investment demonstrated commitment to developing talent at scale, rather than responding only to exceptional individual cases that achieve visibility. Community arts programs expanded nationwide, with emphasis on accessibility. Free lessons, instrument lending libraries, performance opportunities, and pathways connecting community programs to professional development for students, demonstrating exceptional ability. "Every community contains extraordinary talent," emphasized Arts Director Thompson. "Systematic support means creating infrastructure that identifies and nurtures ability wherever it exists, rather than waiting for individuals to somehow navigate systems designed for privileged access." Corporate practices throughout Crane's business empire shifted to emphasize community impact and stakeholder value, rather than exclusively shareholder profit maximization. Development projects now included affordable housing requirements, small business protection measures, and community cultural space preservation. Economic development that destroys community doesn't create value. It transfers it from vulnerable populations to wealthy investors, Crane acknowledged during business conferences. Real progress requires development that strengthens rather than displaces existing communities. Zara herself had become powerful advocate for systematic change while pursuing musical career that balanced artistic development with social impact. Her performances included community concerts, mentorship of young musicians, and explicit advocacy for arts funding and education equity. "My talent was always present," Zara emphasized during advocacy appearances. "What changed wasn't my ability, but systematic willingness to recognize and support it." Every community contains people whose potential remains unrealized due to barriers that policy choices could eliminate. Her testimony combined personal narrative with policy advocacy that elevated conversation beyond individual inspiration to systematic reform requirements. Data tracking showed measurable transformation. Conservatory enrollment of students from low-income backgrounds had increased 340%. Public school arts participation had grown 280%, and longitudinal studies indicated identified talented youth were successfully transitioning to professional careers at rates approaching privileged populations. Systematic barriers are policy choices rather than natural limitations, research demonstrated. When we provide resources and remove obstacles, talent flourishes regardless of economic background. International adoption of Foundations model extended impact globally. Music education programs in 47 countries implemented similar identification and support systems, creating worldwide movement challenging assumptions about talent, opportunity, and human potential. Vincent Crane's personal transformation continued as he confronted other areas where privilege had created blindness to systematic inequality: criminal justice reform, education funding equity, healthcare access, and economic opportunity expansion became focus areas informed by understanding that individual prejudice reflected systematic structural problems. Zara taught me that my assumptions about merit, worth, and ability were shaped by privilege that made systematic inequality invisible, Crane reflected. True transformation requires ongoing examination of how power and privilege create injustice we benefit from without recognizing. 3 years after the encounter that had catalyzed transformation, the systematic changes had created measurable improvement in thousands of lives while challenging cultural assumptions about talent, class, and opportunity that had historically limited potential for countless individuals. 4 years after Vincent Crane's mockery of Zara Bennett on Broadway Street corner, both individuals stood together at Metropolitan Symphony Hall for an event that symbolized comprehensive personal and systematic transformation extending far beyond their initial encounter. The inaugural Zara Bennett Foundation Scholarship Concert featured 100 talented young musicians from economically disadvantaged backgrounds performing alongside established professionals. The evening representing systematic change that had created opportunities for thousands while transforming cultural assumptions about talent and worth. Zara herself, now 21 and enrolled at Metropolitan Conservatory while maintaining active performance career, had become influential advocate for arts education equity, whose testimony before Congress had helped secure historic federal funding for public school music programs. This concert represents systematic change rather than individual exception, Zara addressed the audience of 3,000. Every student performing tonight possesses extraordinary talent that would have remained unrecognized without programs that actively seek ability everywhere rather than assuming it exists only among the privileged. Her evolution from street performer to professional musician and policy advocate demonstrated how removing barriers allowed talent to flourish while contributing to broader social transformation. Vincent Crane, whose prejudice had inadvertently catalyzed the movement that now transformed thousands of lives, addressed the audience with humility earned through genuine transformation. 4 years ago, I stood at Broadway Street corner and mocked this extraordinary young woman based on prejudices I hadn't examined. That moment of cruelty became catalyst for confronting systematic inequality my privilege had made invisible. His acknowledgement of prejudice's systematic rather than individual nature reflected deepened understanding that personal transformation required examining structural injustice rather than simply addressing isolated incidents. Emily Crane, now leading the Foundation's Youth Advisory Board, embodied intergenerational shift in values. My father's transformation taught our family that privilege creates responsibility to dismantle barriers rather than defend systems that benefit us at others' expense. The family commitment to systematic change demonstrated that transformation could extend beyond individuals to reshape institutional legacies. Carlos Mendoza performed duet with Zara that showcased how her original talent had been enhanced rather than replaced by formal training. Zara's gift was always extraordinary. Education refined rather than created her ability, proving that talent exists independent of institutional validation. The musical partnership between legendary artist and formerly dismissed street musician symbolized how recognition and support allowed ability to reach full potential. Statistical evidence displayed during the concert demonstrated measurable impact. Foundation programs had identified and supported 3,000 talented young musicians. Conservatory enrollment from underserved communities had increased 450%. Public school arts participation had grown 320%, and longitudinal studies showed scholarship recipients were successfully launching professional careers. Numbers represent individual lives transformed and potential unleashed, Foundation Director Martinez emphasized. But beyond statistics, we've challenged fundamental assumptions about where talent exists and who deserves opportunity to develop their gifts. Community members from Riverside neighborhood attended as honored guests, their presence acknowledging that Zara's success emerged from community support that had sustained her during years when formal institutions provided no recognition or resources. Zara's talent was nurtured by community that valued her ability before any institution acknowledged it, Reverend Wright reflected. Systematic change must honor community wisdom rather than assuming institutional validation creates rather than merely recognizes excellence. Grace Bennett, Zara's mother, who now worked as registered nurse after completing education the foundation had supported, represented broader family transformation. My daughter's gift was always present, but systematic barriers prevented us from accessing resources that would have developed it. This foundation ensures other families don't face those limitations. Her journey from 3 minimum wage jobs to professional nursing career demonstrated how supporting families created conditions for multiple forms of flourishing rather than isolated individual success. Mama Rose Bennett, whose pawn shop guitar purchase had sparked Zara's musical journey, offered benediction, combining family pride with social vision. God gives gifts to everyone, not just people with money. This foundation helps us see and support the extraordinary abilities that exist in every community when we choose to look with open eyes and generous hearts. Young scholarship recipients performing throughout the evening embodied systematic change's human impact. Each possessed extraordinary talent that would have remained undeveloped without programs actively seeking ability in communities that traditional systems overlooked or excluded. These young musicians represent thousands more whose potential remains unrealized, Zara emphasized. Our work isn't complete until every child with artistic ability receives support to develop their gift regardless of economic circumstances. Her commitment to ongoing advocacy rather than celebrating achieved progress, demonstrated understanding that individual success created responsibility for systematic change rather than permission to abandon broader struggle. Vincent Crane's transformation had extended beyond arts, education to comprehensive re-evaluation of how his wealth and influence could address systematic inequality, criminal justice reform funding, education equity advocacy, affordable housing development, and economic opportunity expansion. Now defined his philanthropic legacy. Zara taught me that prejudice isn't simply individual failure, but systematic pattern, embedded in institutions and assumptions that privilege creates and perpetuates. Crane reflected during closing remarks. True transformation requires ongoing examination of how power operates and commitment to dismantling rather than defending systems that create injustice. The evening concluded with collaborative performance featuring Zara, scholarship recipients, and professional musicians performing piece Zara had composed, titled Gifts Everywhere. Musical celebration of human potential that transcended economic circumstance, racial category, or institutional validation. As the final notes resonated through Metropolitan Symphony Hall, the transformation was complete. The venue that had once represented elite exclusivity now symbolized democratic access to artistic excellence and recognition that talent existed everywhere, rather than exclusively among the privileged. Most importantly, the systematic changes initiated by one street corner encounter had created sustainable infrastructure ensuring thousands of talented young people would receive opportunities that previous generations had been denied through systematic barriers disguised as natural limitations. 4 years ago, I was a street musician whose talent was dismissed as impossible given my circumstances, Zara reflected. Today, I'm professional artist and advocate, working to ensure no child's potential is limited by poverty, prejudice, or systematic barriers that policy choices could eliminate. Her journey from street corner to concert hall, from mockery to recognition, from isolation to influence, represented not merely individual achievement, but evidence that systematic transformation was possible when prejudice was confronted, privilege was examined, and commitment to equity replaced comfortable assumptions about merit and worth. Vincent Crane, whose mockery had catalyzed the movement that now transformed thousands of lives, understood that his remaining years carried responsibility to continue dismantling the prejudices and systems his privilege had once perpetuated. I cannot undo the cruelty of my initial mockery, but I can ensure that moment of recognition becomes sustained commitment to justice, equity, and honoring the extraordinary gifts that exist in every community. The billionaire who had once dismissed a poor black girl's guitar skills had discovered that true wealth lay not in financial accumulation but in recognizing and supporting the boundless human potential that exists everywhere. When we choose to see with clarity rather than prejudice, to support with generosity rather than judgment, and to build systems that nurture rather than constrain the extraordinary abilities that exist in every community, regardless of economic circumstance. That transformation, from mockery to mentorship, from prejudice to partnership, from exclusion to equity, represented the kind of change that made both individual lives and entire societies richer, more just and more fully human. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.